When the ground beneath us shakes, we crave stability. When the heavens open up and rain pours down and we run for shelter. When life presents us with vagueness, with flashes of possibility, we long for mastery. It's more instinct than anything else. But could it be that that instinct that we run to like moths to a flame is leading us astray, that it doesn't have our best interests at heart? Could it be that we're so worried about protecting and maintaining an acceptable image for the world that we forget to build something internally that's worth protecting? What if that shaking is what brings down the foundations that held us back? What if that rain washes away the limits of yesterday as we evolve into something more? And what if those flashes of possibility require of us not mastery, no, not yet, but a willingness to be the fool? And what if that willingness isn't an unfortunate dead end, but a beginning? In one of his lectures at the University of Toronto, Jordan Peterson said, if you are not willing to be a fool, you can't be a master. In the cycle that is self-discovery, that is growth, we have to at some point step into an arena that's foreign to us, that we don't yet understand. We have to be willing to operate with inadequate resources, trusting that, they'll be picked up along the way. And that's a lot to take in. It's painful to know that others are going to have knowledge and skills and competencies that you won't. That you'll willingly inject yourself into the bottom of some hierarchy with nothing more than aspirations. But that willingness is your vehicle. And what's clear is that everyone wants the moon, but very few people have the courage to start constructing that spaceship. Very few have the courage to be the student. That's why our inclination is to quit when we can't snap our fingers and magically be on our way, when we can't leap past that wandering around the unknowns. The reality is, we have to fight, to scrap to obtain that sense of belonging in a particular competency. And just talking about it brings me back. It's an obstacle that we all face. It's super real to me. I remember being featured on a podcast where the host literally asked me, why should I listen to what you have to say? Right? Like, who are you? Why are you road mapping your journey? Right? I remember fighting for relevance in an area in which, at the time I knew almost nothing about. And I love how Peterson articulates this battle. He says at some point, you'll want to make a change and you'll feel like an imposter. And guess what? You are. But you have to be. You'll ultimately feel worse if you don't do it. That's imposter syndrome. Feeling like a stranger in your own body. And guess what? It's not wrong. It's just a beginning. I like explaining it like jumping into a cold pool. Feels uncomfortable at first. It feels out of place, but then things normalize. They become comfortable. And what's the other option? To fear that minute of discomfort and never jump in? It's what we need to tell ourselves when we want something, but the climb seems too steep, right? That climb is manageable. You'll acclimate. The adversary's pushing beyond that fear of starting anew. Taking your limited understanding, bringing it to the base of that mountain, a new Goliath, and looking up with confidence. And the question is, can you be foolish enough to do that? And once you've made that ceiling your next floor, will you be foolish enough to do it again and again and again? And breaking through that fear, knowing that stumbling around for a period of time doesn't kill you, it's required. It's the inability to show weakness or appear vulnerable. That's what chips away at you for a lifetime. If you want more, immerse yourself in that cycle of mastery. Start at the bottom and ascend. And when you approach the top, separate yourself and find another ceiling to chase. Replant a seed. Play the role of the fool again. This is the formula for growth, for prosperity, for fulfillment. This is the pathway to anything of substance. You take your L's, you embrace your critics, you swallow your pride, and move towards a tomorrow that far exceeds today. As your reality changes, your perception changes, the company you keep changes, you'll start to see that what's around you is made by people who are willing to fail and fail often. Our world is one devised by those who could put pride on hold, by those who were humble enough to crawl through the unknown long before they ran anything, who knew that before they played for any title or championship, they must first play the fool. Let's talk about the most important thing one can do while navigating the trials and tribulations of life. The thing that, as far as I can tell, supersedes all others, the great equalizer of human beings. One's ability to get back up. You simply cannot defeat someone who, despite the inevitable obstacles life presents, rises to their feet again and again. You can't take someone down who molds the adversity they face into armor they wear. No, those people are gods of their own worlds. They are immune to the shackles that hold most back. See, the world is unpredictable. It's challenging. Often it takes everything we have, right? Even the most planful and most prepared are at some point taken down. Even the most skilled will at some point find themselves outmatched. There are no perfect roads and there are no flawless performances. No one wins all the time, which implies necessarily the ones who create meaning in the world are the ones who shape it from that chaos that surrounds them. Who, when brought to their knees, refuse to roll over and look at the world from their back, but instead rise with a more thoughtful, aware, focused, depersonalized approach. Life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. It's not giving you problems, it's giving you building blocks. The differentiator is some people build walls around themselves, and some build staircases to the moon. But ultimately, we are all building something. And you might ask, really? Rising when you fall? That's the most important thing? More so than courage? Strength, intelligence, confidence? More than faith, contentment, success, growth, joy, more than love? And my thought is 100%, because you don't get any of those things without the ability to rise in the face of their opposites. Being those things means fighting for those things, and fighting for those things means a commitment to stand, to reach for them. Even when the world says no, even when the road is long. If you learn to rise when you're fearful, when you're tired, when you're lost, confused, or angry, if you promise yourself getting back up is not up for debate, that there will be no negotiation, that it's what you do and who you are, you simultaneously hold the world in the palm of your hand. See, most focus on avoiding the ground. And because of this, they find themselves disheartened when life is, well, life. We've all been there, right? Sometimes you cannot avoid falling. Sometimes the ground comes to you. Sometimes you get no say. And the ones who find meaning in the pain, who brush themselves off and carry on into the night, well, they're the ones with the power to change themselves and the world. You can't make something that already exists. You find it, unmask, unveil, allow it to shine through in its original state. It can be improved upon or enhanced, but who you are is who you are. And that's a beautiful thing. Because success is not about looking around you and trying to replicate someone else's idea of a life well lived. No, it's about removing everything you're not, until all that's left is what matters most, you in your most authentic state. That state that most people don't bother to uncover. And see, in a world of acquisition, of longing for more, it's the ones who learn to cut away that truly live. It's in refinement, simplification that we find clarity, that we're gifted with peace of mind. Because it's the burden of constantly doing something that doesn't excite, or playing a role that is not yours to play, that is the costly one. Life is about meaning. And to deprive yourself of that is to remove the wind from the sail. We are not free until we decide to be. As Greg McKeown mentions in his book Essentialism, the Latin root of the word decide, cis or sid, literally means to cut or kill. It's to walk away from what you're not. Unearthing the power, the value, the potential that always existed despite our ignorance. So let's no longer ask, what do I need in order to be who I want to become? And start asking, what can I remove that is infringing upon who I am? What can I dismantle so that I might give wings to that which means the most? There's a quote attributed to H. Jackson Brown Jr. He says, "Nothing is more expensive than a missed opportunity." I tend to agree with this. I also think it's interesting that these missed opportunities are also the most difficult, if not impossible, to quantify. Right, so if you think about our common understanding of progress or growth, it's a sacrifice. Right? It's doing X brings us Y. Doing the work gets the result. It's a simple formula, and you can show your proof. You can work backwards. Right? I started working out 1 hour a day 6 months ago. This is what I look like now. The cost was 1 hour a day. The result, well, this is what I look like now. But what's the inverse of that thinking? What's the cost of not doing the work or starting the journey or taking the steps? See, we don't think about that. We don't think about the opportunity cost. Our instinct is not to question the actions we don't take. I was listening to an old lecture from Jim Rohn, who I love because he's such a practical thinker. He's got ideas you can literally, plug right into your life. And he had an amazing point. He was talking about a conversation with an old friend in which he asks his friend, who apparently watches a lot of TV, he says, "Hey, what does that TV cost?" His friend says, "Well, I think it's like $500. Jim says, no, I don't think so. His friend says, yeah, I bought it, $500. He says, no, I think it's costing you about $40K a year. Why? Well, not because of what he paid for the item, but because of the opportunity cost. What his time using that TV could be reallocated to. That's what's so incredible about that point. It's like, just because you don't have something doesn't mean you aren't in fact losing out on it. Time is our most precious of commodities. Its utilization is the gateway to transformation. It should be protected. And, the intent of the message is not to walk around panicking about every second, of every minute, but more being aware holistically how recklessly we use our time. I don't know if you've ever looked at the screen time usage on a cell phone before going to bed at night. It's terrifying. Right? Some of it was necessary, but a lot of it wasn't. And what does that cost? What does 2 hours a day of not moving towards a dream or goal cost you? What about when it accumulates and it becomes 14 hours a week, or roughly 56 hours a month, or times 12, 672 hours a year? These numbers start to get eye-opening. Right? All it takes is a little awareness, and we see how often we dispose of time like it's valueless. Everything we do has a cost, because in doing it, we are making a decision to not be doing something else with that time. And again, I believe in balance. I want to emphasize that. I'm not suggesting that we walk around like robots, clocking in, clocking out, checking boxes so that we don't ever waste a minute, right? As the great Keith Urban says, the best days of my life were all that wasted time. We should explore and enjoy and love and laugh and experience life. But that awareness makes us more intentional with those pursuits. With our work time and our play time, it forces us in a way to prioritize, to ask ourselves what we want. Instead of only looking at progress like this vending machine where you put an X and Y comes out. Well, we can ask ourselves, what happens if I don't put an X? What happens if I keep it in my pocket? What won't come out? What could have existed that now won't? See, just because you don't see something slipping away, that doesn't mean that it isn't. And the immediate, the world in front of you, unfortunately, won't remind you of that. That's a bell you have to ring yourself. You have to peel back the what am I doing and unveil the what could I be doing? What could I be creating? What could reality look like? And maybe you think about it and you find that you're right where you want to be. And that's great. Maybe you realize you've accepted a tolerable existence at the expense of an ideal existence. In which case, I also have great news. You can change that, and you can change it now. We have to understand that you don't only have what's in front of you, you also possess a reality unseen and undiscovered. So don't let the former cover up or diminish the latter. Don't lose the possibility of tomorrow with the distractions of today. Don't forget the cost of inaction with regard to those things that truly matter. One day, it will all make sense. As one Steve Jobs said during a Stanford commencement speech, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. Your job isn't to know, but to trust that someday you will. It's to have the courage to paint in real time a portrait that will be ever evolving. It's the strength to be wrong, the resolve to rise to your feet time and time again. Because one day, it will all make sense. And you'll see. You'll see that the roundabout, often confusing, unpredictable road you walked was the road you had to take. It made you who you are. And you'll see that all those challenges forced you to become someone that you, at one point in your life, never dreamed you could become. You'll see that those people in your life, the ones you clung to, the ones you saw as permanent fixtures in that ever-evolving story, they were merely temporary, supporting characters, there to teach you about yourself and the world before exiting stage left. You'll see that the scariest things weren't the failures looming around every corner. They were the magic never created for fear of what lurked around those corners. You'll see that dropped into the heart of even the most violent storms, the darkest of nights, you always had enough to get out. Sometimes the steps were too small and the progress too unremarkable to notice, but those clouds, at one point or another, always ended up behind you. In life, the game itself becomes the instruction manual. To understand, you have to play. To learn, you have to go. Therefore, a life well lived can't be about having all the answers. You're crafting them with every step you take. It's about trust, it's about belief. Not in a defined trail, but in your ability to blaze your own. I encourage you, as you navigate the day-to-day unknowns, to remember how strong you are. When you're frustrated at the hand you've been dealt, when you're hurt, when you're saddened by something that's transpired, remember that you can handle it, that there's meaning in the pain, in the chaos, right? Because I know our default isn't to smile and mentally transport to the value that the pain will someday bring, right? I get it. But you have to know that you can, one, make it through the chaos, and know that, two, there will be a point in your future when you look over your shoulder and appreciate the turbulence you endured. You'll be grateful because of the beauty, the meaning, and the happiness it ultimately brought to fruition. That's what makes life worth living. You'll be grateful for the struggle because it empowered you to push further into life. It taught you to not only endure, but to find meaning in suffering. To ultimately create something beautiful out of the very thing you wanted to run away from, but didn't. See, life is not all one thing. It's an oscillating wave of circumstances. And you'll see at some point that every second mattered, in the sense that it gave you exactly what you needed most when you needed it. So trust that the road will be unpredictable, because that's exactly what the road will be. But also trust yourself to be someone who navigates the foreign waters ahead. Someone who points the compass straight towards the horizon. Because regardless of the world around you, that's exactly who you are. I was recently reading a book called The Boys in the Boat. about 9 American rowers from Washington that won gold in the 1936 Olympics. And there's this incredible exchange at one point in the book between the main character, Joe, who's part of that historic boat, and a man named George Pocock, who was not only a brilliant rowing mind that helped the team out, but he also had his own business crafting and making the boats, or rowing shells, as they were called, and he would make them and send them to schools all over the country. And so Joe's deal is that he's this natural talent, right? Strong kid, tough as nails, but just seems to lose his composure from time to time. Right? When he's in the boat, there are these moments of jaw-dropping excellence, unprecedented speed across the water, and then there are moments when he loses his focus, and the boat sort of follows suit, right? They're inconsistent. And so George Pocock, being the rowing expert that he is, made a commitment to see if he could help Joe figure that out, right? The mental game. So he calls Joe into his shop, and he starts showing him how he puts together these highly coveted boats, showing him the tools and the pieces and how it's nothing short of an art. He has sort of this divine respect for his craft. And at one point, he pulls out a cedar plank that he'll be using to make one of the boats, and he points to the growth rings in the wood, mentioning that they tell the story of the tree's 2,000-year life. And so here's a quick quote from the exchange. He says, "Their thickness and thinness spoke of hard years of bitter struggle, intermittent with rich years of sudden growth. The different colors spoke of various soils and minerals that the tree's roots had encountered, some harsh and stunting, some rich and nourishing. Flaws and irregularities told how the tree endured fires and lightning strikes, windstorms and infestations, and yet continued to grow. Almost as if there was something sacred about it. The wood taught us about survival, about overcoming difficulty, about prevailing over adversity, but it also taught us something about the underlying reason for surviving in the first place. Something about infinite beauty, underlying grace, about things larger and greater than ourselves, about the reasons we are all here." I paused after reading that and thought for a minute or two, what is it about those rowers crossing the finish line after giving everything they have that touches us so deeply? What is it about a cedar tree standing the test of time, those 2,000 years of adversity, only to triumphantly pierce the sky when all is said and done? It moves us because it tells us what we already know, yet forget. In our hearts believe, but often fail to see. That we are greater than the sum of our parts. Ernest Becker, when he was touching on the aspect of the human predicament, he famously noted that we are simultaneously worms and gods, earthly and divine. And I think it's in those moments, the crossing of finish lines, the times we did more than we ever thought possible, or looked back and smiled about all we overcame. It's in these times we're able to transcend the mundane, the everyday. We're able to remind ourselves that sure, some aspects of us are merely human, but no aspects are ordinary. The greatest power one can witness is that of the human spirit, bending but never breaking, making light of the odds and an example of the predictable. So know that whether now is difficult or not, it's part of your journey, a defining chapter in the incredible story of your life. And if you find yourself up, cherish that. It's more precious than gold. And if you find yourself down, remember that you'll look back on this growth ring of your life and be grateful that it gave you that which smooth sailing never could. Because at the end of the day, all you have is what's in front of you. The next move, the next step, and the faith that all these little pieces will someday mean something. That standing the test of time will speak for itself. At your finish line, whatever that may be, it will. You'll look back and see that without your knowing or awareness, they propelled you into the current moment. They gave life to something beyond the realm of worms and dirt, beyond the realm of humans operating in their day-to-day world. No, they allowed you, for a moment in time, to touch the infinite, if only to prove to yourself that you could. When you wake up in the morning, I want you to visualize this. I want you to visualize a world where you know, where you're certain that good ideas flow through you. Where the world around you needs and appreciates your courage, your decision-making. Imagine a world where you aren't reliant on anyone or anything to fix the issues in your life, to make things better. Instead, you see yourself as the guy or gal that makes it happen, that steps up. You're responsible for being the change you want to see. I want you to imagine stepping outside your house, shoulders back, head held high, excited to go chase down all that opportunity. Because one, you know it's there, and two, you know you are worthy of it. Now hold that thought and think, this could be the reality you live. As soon as you wait for it, give yourself permission to live that way. How different would your life be if you greenlit those things? See, it's hard to break away from the framing that we've given ourselves, especially over time, how it's materialized. It's hard to reinvent the identity you've created for the person staring back at you in the mirror. But the truth is, all worthwhile things are hard. I love the Robin Sharma quote. It says, if you want what only the 5% have, you need to be willing to do what only the 5% are willing to do. And sure, this could be physical, dedication, long hours. Could be a lot of things. But before any of that, how about seeing yourself worthy of someone who can become the 5%? That in and of itself is hard. In fact, believing that, for me, was one of the greatest challenges of my life. Seeing myself as that person, right? That doesn't come easy. It has to be chipped away at, earned. But when you create that mentality, when you hold on tight and you walk towards it relentlessly, you become it. Little by little, day by day. So much of life is making yourself believe you are who you want to be. It's a perpetual feedback loop of sorts. You believe you are, so you act like it, which then reinforces your belief, which prompts greater action, and around we go. I'm going to give you sort of an arbitrary example of how powerful this can be. A few months ago, for the first time, I hired a cleaning service, which my rationale used to be, dude, put on a podcast, zone out, clean up a little bit. Once a week, who cares, right? But that little investment changed a lot. One, my place looks nicer, so I feel better and I'm more productive. It's consistently just nicer to be here. And two, and most important, is that it prompts me to think like the creator and founder and business owner I want to be. It helped prompt a mental shift or further a mental shift. It says I am the type of person who's very methodical with my time. My time equals too valuable to do anything that doesn't push my art or business forward. It's that simple. And that bleeds into other decisions I make. Pushes that loop that we talked about, right? Some investments are valuable in that they help shape your perception. On days where I'm writing, where I'm not going out, or I have no meetings, I try not to wear sweatpants and a basketball jersey, right? And at first it's like, it's comfortable, who cares, no one's around. Yeah, true. But would the type of person we visualized at the beginning of this episode wear that? Probably not. He'd probably try and be more consistent in how he felt, and how he acted, and how he carried himself. It's half the battle. Same thing with waking up early. Is it really the end of the world if I were to sleep in? No, it's really not. But would the type of person we mentioned at the beginning of this episode sacrifice a little bit to get a head start? I think he would. To me, rolling out of bed whenever we want simply says I'm not quite ready to be the next version of myself or level of myself. I'm okay with how things are, right? There's this sense of ambition and excitement, manufactured urgency in getting up before or as the sun's rising. I mean, to me, that's just how it is. Doesn't mean it's the only way, but to me, it's one of life's hidden advantages. In other words, it's very likely that if you do those things, you will start to feel like the type of person who does those things. And there's power in that. We can do so much, create so much change, add so much value, but we don't even consider it in many cases because it feels too foreign. We're nowhere near giving ourselves permission to pursue that greatness we're capable of obtaining. Our day-to-day looks very different. Our actions, right, the decisions we make are very different. In order to grow, we have to set ourselves and the world around us up for growth. We have to surround ourselves with people that push us towards the place we want to be. Do things that align with our intended trajectory. Arrange the pieces so that they are indicative of what's possible, not what was. I keep learning how small the adjustments are in life that shape and reshape our reality. So small that no wonder they're laughed at, ignored. It's the little things we do that comprise how we feel, how we see ourselves. The identity, the role we play, is just the culmination of these little decisions over time. So as you wake up in the morning, remember, you are that person. The one who moves with confidence, who acts with courage, who helps and adds value to those around him. Good ideas do flow through you. Greatness is waiting to be unveiled, but you need to believe it for yourself and start making the little adjustments that will reinforce it. Get that feedback loop in motion. How you feel becomes what you do, becomes how you feel, becomes what you do. Right? And it'll amaze you that you didn't free yourself sooner, that you didn't unleash your potential earlier. As the saying goes, the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The second best is right now. So close your eyes, visualize how great life will become, and start planting. One of life's greatest lessons is that yesterday is only as powerful as we allow it to be. Yesterday is an idea, a story, a movie that started and ended. Now, it's quite possible that story or that ending is disappointing, or it hurts to look back on. Perhaps a reminder of something that wasn't ideal, something you want to break away from. So the question is, why do we give that old story power? Why do we relive it, create this self-inflicted wound? See, the past undoubtedly played a critical role. It brought you to where you are now. It, in many ways, shaped your worldview, constitutes your beliefs. It was the very road to this moment, and there's value in that. But imagine this scenario. Imagine stepping into your car, turning the keys, and thinking to yourself that you can, in this very moment, only drive down the roads you drove on yesterday. Only associate with the street signs you know, the places you've already gone. Your reality now is determined by what you've already done. So adjust and get used to it. You would say that's outrageous, right? Yesterday's path has nothing to do with where I'm going now. Just like a boat's wake trailing off behind it has nothing to do with where it's going next. The person holding the wheel controls that. We are saturated with freedom. There is so much opportunity and possibility and potential in front of us that we fail to see because we can't stop thinking about that fictitious story we call yesterday. We confuse the path we took then for the one we need now, the wake from the steering wheel, what is, and that story about what was. The gateway to change is unshackling ourselves from those imaginary monsters. And more often than not, the answer isn't in finding some solution, it's in cutting ties with those things that no longer serve us. Then we see the world as it truly is. Then we see the magic laid out before us. And I get that it's easier said than done. Leaving a part of us behind hurts. Looking in the mirror and being vulnerable enough to say, I can be more than this. It's not easy, but it's possible. And everything starts with how we see ourselves. And when we remain captives to the past, everything about who we think ourselves to be is outdated. We're neglecting one of our superpowers, the perpetual ability to restart. And one of the most important conversations I've ever had was on this topic. It seemed trivial at the time, but I was having lunch with a friend, and we're talking, and I mentioned to her that I was full. And she goes, well, then why are you still eating? And I'm like, because I paid for it, right? I wanted to get my money's worth. And she says in a very, pragmatic way, Eddie, just because you paid for it doesn't mean you need to eat it, right? It's a sunk cost. Why don't you move on? And the whole thing seems silly, right? It's like, yeah, if you're not hungry, don't eat. Move on. But in the grand scheme of things, how many of us keep on consuming that which doesn't serve us? How many of us stay too long when we should be letting go? We let the path behind us dictate the one before us. See, there's a tendency to overvalue what we know, to feel so invested in how things are, even when we're not happy or it's not healthy, that we'll take the pain of now over the potential for something greater. And that's precisely why the unknown is so terrifying. It's not concrete. It's a world unsettled. And man, do we hate being unsettled. But what we fail to realize is that every time we close our eyes, take a breath, and work up the courage to step into that unknown, to leave yesterday behind us, life gives us new pieces. It resets the stage. It provides new tools to build something incredible, something more ideal, more conducive to our goals, our hopes, and our dreams. And the thought is, well, but what if things become worse than they are right now? What if I move forward and I find myself more confused, more lost? What if things are more chaotic? And that may, for a moment, be true. But what we do is we adjust. We learn things we never knew. We see things through a lens that we never could, touch things that we never thought existed. It wasn't in staying, but in leaving, that we rediscovered who we were meant to be, that we allowed our truest selves to flourish. And worst case scenario, contrary to popular belief, it's not that the world ends. No, the worst case scenario, should you find the courage to move forward, is that you end up right back where you started. A little more confident, a little bolder, and better prepared to live this life like you never had. All that's needed is for you to convince yourself that there is more. You just need to taste the fruit, step into the sunlight. That's the difference between reality and the story in your head. Reality is that this world has for you everything you need to change, to grow, explore, build a life that means something. It has the support structures and the resources for you to pull yourself back up every time you fall. To say, okay, that hurt, but now let's try a different angle. There is undoubtedly what you need. And the question is never whether the X on that treasure map exists. Trust me, it's there. The question is whether you can pause that story in your head. The tales of a dark, mean, and scary world trying to hold you down. Pause the idea that you're nothing more than the you of yesterday. You're nothing more than how people knew you to be. Pause the idea that you're nothing without that job title or that relationship. Pause the idea that you need him or her or them in your life. Every day you wake up, you are a blank canvas. Who cares about yesterday? What do you want to paint now? When you walk out your front door, where do you want to go now? Step outside that circle of familiarity. See how artificial and in some cases ridiculous these boundaries are that we place around ourselves. Life is an invitation, not a set of requirements. And when you free yourself of that, not only will you feel like someone new, not only will you experience life as it was meant to be experienced, but you'll see that this world will conform to your new definition. This world wants to support you. It wants to lift you up. And yeah, it may be challenging and strenuous. It may force you to work harder and be braver than you've ever been. But it is, at the end of the day, your ally. You just have to see your future self before it materializes, when no one else gets it. So move on from all that does not serve you. Break away from the old rules, regulations, and guidelines. Maybe you exhausted time and energy into creating this reality. Maybe it feels like a monumental piece of your identity. Maybe right now is the only security you have. Fine. But my hope is that you can respect it and walk away. See it as the sunken cost that it is. Just because you paid to get there doesn't mean you need to keep paying to make wrong decisions. Just because it took your time doesn't mean it's entitled to keep stealing your time. Just because it's part of your identity now doesn't mean it must be tomorrow. Just because it creates security doesn't mean it's right. Jails and steel bars are also incredibly secure. No, today we are breaking free, leaving the past in the past and setting our sights on the horizon. Today is the end of yesterday and the beginning of the rest of your life. You're right where you need to be. Sure, you have your doubts. Perhaps you feel tired, alone, fearful. Maybe you're trying to make sense of a world that feels too complex, where all you see and hear are reasons to turn back, to find shelter, to run. Don't. Regardless of how hard it seems, don't. You are right where you need to be. Turning thoughts to things, making life from dreams. What makes change so interesting, so powerful yet deceptive, is that it comes to us in small doses. Not a tidal wave of transformation, but a slow, steady, rising tide of progress. No one feels the tug of erosion, yet it chips away. And so do you. Removing piece by piece the old you, the world you're moving away from, and piece by piece, you unveil the promise of your becoming. You may not see the whole picture. You may not understand the whole story, but right now, in real time, it's being told. And you are right where you need to be. We just weren't equipped to understand what that looks like. It's never been what you see that makes you uneasy. It's what's missing. That's what hurts. The solutions you wanted, the changes you expected, the finish lines you envisioned. It's the wondering, how long must I wait? Did I make a wrong turn? Is the joke on me? But it's this line of questioning that causes so many to stop, unaware of how close they were, ignorant to the foundation they were standing on. What you need is not a miracle. It's to simply carry on, to keep laying those bricks, because not a one is wasted. And sometimes you don't realize you're on the 80th floor until you look down. That climb can be frustrating, exhausting. It isn't always glamorous, but it's necessary. And strength comes from understanding that truth. You are right where you need to be. The world, it can't take what you refuse to give it, and self-belief is non-negotiable. It's off the table, your most prized possession. So hold it tight, because it'll be needed when the journey feels long and the road impossible. You'll know that you can always take one step forward, and that is the essence of life, of growth, of progress. Think about the steps, the lessons, the self-discovery that led you to this intersection of now and forever, this beginning of whatever you decide comes next. You are right where you need to be, because you are armed with the decisions that brought you to today and the courage to let them carry you into tomorrow. You could be anywhere, but you're here. And as you strap up and settle in, you'll see that right here is everything you need. Someone once told me that no one further along than you will ever try and bring you down. That it's the people who see you pursuing your dream and are reminded that they've given up on theirs that usually make the most noise. And, knowing this essentially invalidates all criticism. Who cares, right? It's the metaphorical dog nipping at your ankles. One, it's to be expected, and two, often best ignored. right? The question is, are you able to separate it out as just part of the process? Can you ignore all that stuff that's sort of hovering around you as you walk your path? Or do you let it in? Do you personalize it? Do you make it bigger than it is? Imagine a world where you protected dearly the things you let into your mind. You understood that things don't happen to you, they merely happen. And you get to choose what they'll mean. Imagine if you lived with enough conviction to do what excited you, what felt right, knowing that, sure, some folks might have something to say, but that's just a tiny variable in the great play of life. It's rain on a summer day. You pick up the umbrella and you carry on. It's hard to describe, but we never really understand how little these social variables will mean until some time has gone by. I often think about being younger and caring so much, right, as a kid about being quote unquote cool or uncool. I didn't say, wear, or do certain things because fitting in was so important. I cared what my friends or classmates might think. We all did, right? And looking back now, it's like, what would I tell that version of me? It's pretty easy and pretty clear now, actually, as years have passed. I'd say, do what feels right. What we often fail to realize is that that very same concept applies to the present day. The things that feel big now probably aren't, right? They're little details masquerading as life or death decisions. Just like they were when I had to have, that Power Ranger backpack or my life would be over. It's fear of judgment. But I learn again and again what really matters. Was I good to the people around me? Did I do what mattered to me? And did I do it with conviction? I think it can be that simple. Hold tightly the meaningful things and don't let the other noise infiltrate your peace. In early 2020, I decided I'd go to North Carolina for a little bit. And I wasn't exactly sure how long, but I knew that I needed to go. It felt right. I had a friend up there, some work I wanted to do up there. And so basically, I got rid of so many things I owned that what was left fit into my little 2-door Cadillac. That's not a lot of things. And, spent some time up there, enjoyed it, got a lot done. When it was time to go back to Florida, I'm planning my trip and I realized, oh my God, I have a U-Haul full of things. Having a little place to stay, right? Needing basic things, some cheap furniture, some technology. Right? Not because it was intentional, but because it was unintentional, right? Because when you don't pay attention, our natural inclination is to pick unnecessary things up. I think our personal lives are similar. We collect things without protecting the core that matters most, allowing life to ultimately become so cluttered that we can't differentiate. How can you tell what's important when you have a U-Haul full of things? What's important when you let too much into your life? You end up with shelf space for the opinions of those who wouldn't even come by and visit if you were in the hospital. The words of people who don't have your best interest at heart, the fears of what could go wrong, the ego not allowing vulnerability. These things have no teeth when life is simple. Protecting your world is one of the most powerful things you can do. Being the gatekeeper for your mind is strength. Criticism, haters, skeptics. It's not that these things don't exist, it's that they will fall around you like rain as you move on to better things. You don't stop because of them, just like you don't go because of them. You simply exist with and move alongside them. You understand why they're there, But you don't give them the luxury of infiltrating your inner peace. You do not let them in. Your world within is precious. And as you navigate the external world, we have to choose wisely what gets permitted.